Good morning. I hope you guys are doing well. I am doing well. Like I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I mean it's like 6 o'clock in the morning before I even go to work on a random Tuesday morning. But last night I've just been thinking, and I feel so compelled to record, my thoughts this morning because I have this deep desire for partnership. I'm just like, I want a partner, and I speak quite extensively about my journey to finding the love of my life, especially on TikTok, oftentimes with a flair of romanticism. But I've been thinking so deeply about this issue, and I realize how deeply rooted it is in the way society functions, how integrated it is in you know, our cultural values, our capitalist society, in the way everything functions. And I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm also complicit in this overall system, and perpetuating ideas that women should seek um, partnership with a man or romanticize the idea. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with romanticism, right? I must also give a disclaimer that my thoughts are just jumbled up this morning. So I'm just going to be speaking as I feel. Bear with me. Um, but I speak about, desiring partnership with a certain kind of man, a man who is successful in and of themselves. And by success, I just don't mean monetary value or monetary success, but who is comfortable in their career, does well. But I think the part that's often lacking from romantic relationships with men, I want someone who is emotionally intelligent, who's present, supportive, kind, and all these other things that are often lacking from traditional or typical relationships. And the reason I want that so much is because I can recognize that emotional labor, for instance, has been relegated to a woman's role, even in relationships where both men and women earn equally or they perform work outside of the home. You do see women still, taking on a lot of this invisible labor, unpaid labor. you know in their home, women will still take care of the domestic labor, for instance, the cleaning, the cooking, child minding, you know even the emotional stuff, whereas men only come in as providers, or even if they aren't 100% providers, they do a bit of this and this there, or their limited role in domestic work is not questioned. And the point is not that. The point is, as a society in large, marriage has been so beneficial, often at the expense of women, or long-term partnership between men and women has been so beneficial to society in large because governments don't have to pay for domestic work. Okay, not domestic work because, I mean, they have no place in the home, but they don't have to allocate resources for child minding. They don't have to think about solutions for taking care of the elderly, because oftentimes wives take up that role in families. Daughters or girl children end up taking that role in families. And so this structure for me perpetuates a situation where women or women's autonomy is limited. And autonomy is such a big thing for me, like, or freedom rather, like the ability for me to exist for myself, as I am, not for people. It's very important to me, but I do recognize that within a marriage environment or within a long-term partnership, especially with a man, that's likely to diminish, either by being so by filling my time with all these other duties as a wife, or that I no longer have time for myself, time to focus on my own interests and build, things that also fuel me. I mean, I think about, work, guys. I enjoy being productive. I enjoy solving problems, showing up in that particular way. And that kind of stimulation is lacking in a home environment. It doesn't matter how much I sometimes loathe work and I'm like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed. But there's still a joy I derive from thinking quite critically about problems and being able to come up with solutions to them. Working in that kind of pressured environment, something I couldn't mimic or recreate in a home environment. Even though, nowadays there's a narrative that's pushing for women being, housewives and house girlfriends, and oftentimes, or like, occasionally I also dabble in that, especially when I'm frustrated at work, and romanticize the idea of being a house girlfriend or a stay-at-home girlfriend or partner, you know what I mean? But it would be reckless to almost perpetuate that idea without really acknowledging the work that's gone into women's right to work, to being productive, and the dangers also of not acknowledging the risk. Guys, men, we can't run away from this. Men are known to use their financial resources to control women in marriages, in familial relationships. So to voluntarily leave work or any economic productive means just to be taken care of by a man almost feels irresponsible to me, because men can switch up on you anytime. And it doesn't matter how much they love you, they can switch up on you, and it's important that when that happens, God forbid it does, but when it happens, you do have alternatives. Part of the reason why, my thoughts are just jumbled up, but I know we complain about the divorce rates being so high nowadays, or in modern day society, and that being because women have rights and whatnot. But it's also important to think about the fact that practically, realistically, women couldn't divorce from a man because they couldn't open their own bank account, they couldn't own land. In other societies, I'd even say access, any resources outside of having their brother, their father, their spouse sign on their behalf. You know what I mean? So to then, push for younger girls or romanticize the idea that, I just want a man who's taking care of me. I don't want to think. I don't want to do this. It almost feels reckless for younger generations who are looking up to us without truly, grappling with the idea that the alternative isn't necessarily romantic. The alternative isn't better. It could be worse for women. So that said, I do still desire partnership. How bad is the indoctrination, guys? And in my mind, I almost hope that my partnership with a man will be different. But obviously, there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees that I'm going to have such an amazing relationship with my partner, that it's going to be free from, control or me losing myself in the relationship. And oftentimes it happens slowly. You start foregoing certain things for the sake of peace. Eventually you wake up one day and you barely recognize the person in front of you. You're like, what happened to that person who was so ambitious, who, had ideas of her own, who had dreams and thoughts that were removed from, the man and the family. And now all my time is consumed by making sure that I take care of everyone else, and yet I'm not taken care of, And I don't just mean the bills are paid, I'm clothed, whatever. Me as a person inside, am I nurtured? Are my interests being nurtured? Am I being fulfilled? And I don't want to find fulfillment in a child. I really don't. And maybe that might happen, I don't know. But I also want fulfillment to come from other things, interests, hobbies that are not related to, my partner. But I fear that relationships as we know them now, or as they are playing out in society, they're lacking in that. So yeah, those are my random thoughts this morning. I just, yeah. Guys, I'm just let me pause. Okay, so just to conclude, my thoughts are still jumbled up still. But I was saying I just hope that I find a partnership that balances, all of this. Wow, balances his, desires and interests and dreams and goals with mine. Being in a long-term partnership with a man, for me, hopefully, doesn't mean that I get to let go of my dreams. That my partner becomes someone who can champion my own goals as much as I do his. Because I know women, we do tend to support people so much that that support fuels them to dream even more. But do we also get the same in return? Because relationships are supposed to be reciprocal. I imagine partnership being that reciprocal, not just someone who takes and takes and takes, and I'm left with nothing in return. I want a cheerleader, you guys, because I know I'm like the certified cheerleader for everyone in my life. But if someone feels ashamed or embarrassed for being a cheerleader because it makes them look like a simp, then I don't want none of that. I already know what that relationship is gonna look like, and I have no desire to be in it. I know as society we like to celebrate men for the barest minimum, and I suppose I'm guilty of this too, where when I like someone, everything they do seems like, oh my gosh, it's so big, and I'm like, but I would do that in a heartbeat. For me, that's not even princess treatment, if you will, to use the language that is common now on social media. But I just hope for discernment in my engagements with potential partners, that I am lucid enough to still identify patterns that I wouldn't want in my relationship, but also for the universe to conspire in my favor by bringing this person whom I get to build and grow and evolve with, without losing myself, without my dreams going to die. Like, I don't want my relationship to be the graveside for my own aspirations. Yeah. Anyway, excuse me. I hope you guys will have a lovely day. That's it from me today. I just felt so compelled to say this because it's so irresponsible oftentimes to, push one narrative without truly reflecting on the other side, often the negative side that's not so glamorous and nice to talk about. I hope you learned something today. Have a lovely day, and please be good and exercise discernment in your relationships.